No contact versus no contact often feels like a strange game of shadows, a battle where nothing is said but everything is meant. On the outside, it looks identical, two people ignoring each other, neither one reaching out, both sitting in silence. But if you look closely, the silence is not the same. One person's silence is born out of intention, out of discipline, out of a deeper respect for themselves. The other's silence often comes from pride, stubbornness, or a desperate need to manipulate the situation. That difference is everything. What looks like a standoff is actually two very different strategies, and only one of them leads to growth. A man who chooses no contact as a deliberate path uses it as a shield and a sword at the same time. It shields him from emotional chaos and it sharpens him into someone stronger, someone more centered. The one who enters no contact out of impulse or to test the other person eventually finds the silence unbearable, because it was never meant to heal them, it was only meant to bait. The war of silence is not about who speaks first, it is about who becomes stronger in the quiet. The one who holds steady, who takes the space and transforms it into energy, wins without ever saying a word. In the beginning, both sides may feel powerful, as if withholding communication is an equal move. But time always reveals the truth. The man who embraces silence with patience and purpose grows, while the one who tries to use silence as a weapon ends up trapped by it. That's why no contact is never really the same on both sides. It may look identical, but its results are completely different depending on the strength behind it. When a man commits to no contact the right way, he is not interested in petty games or temporary victories. His silence is not about trying to make her jealous, it's not about proving a point, and it's certainly not about hoping she comes back with an apology. It is about him choosing himself. He decides to remove the endless cycle of overthinking, the late-night texts that go unanswered, the begging that leaves him feeling smaller every time. In place of all that wasted energy, he builds. His silence becomes active rather than empty. He starts focusing on the gym, on his career, on his passions, on his future. He replaces hours of waiting for her reply with hours of investing in his own growth. The void she left behind doesn't remain a void for long, it becomes filled with purpose. That is why a man's no contact is fundamentally different, because when he does it right, it elevates him. Every day he stays disciplined, he shows himself he is capable of control. And women notice this shift, even if it is unspoken. When she sees he is not chasing, not begging, not orbiting her world, it unsettles her. Most men fold at the first sign of distance, so when he doesn't, it sends a powerful signal. His silence becomes a mystery she cannot solve. It builds curiosity. It forces her to wonder what he's doing, who he's with, whether he even thinks of her at all. That silence, backed by discipline and action, carries more weight than any words he could say. And as he continues to grow in the quiet, his absence speaks volumes. It says, "I don't need you to validate me. I validate myself." When a woman decides to go no contact, the intention behind it is often layered with a different kind of energy. It is rarely about healing or building herself in silence, instead, it is more often used as a tactic. Her withdrawal is a test, a way to measure how much influence she still has over you. She wants to see if you will notice the distance, if you will panic at her absence, if you will rush in with desperate messages or apologies that reaffirm her power. For many women, silence is not a path to growth but a tool of control. She waits for signs of weakness, for cracks in your resolve. Most men fail this test, not because they are incapable of being strong, but because they are driven by their emotions. The moment she pulls away, they scramble to close the gap, chasing after her affection, begging for reassurance, and giving her the validation she was looking for all along. This is why her silence can feel so effective at first. It plays on male vulnerability. But the man who understands the game does not crumble. He doesn't rush to prove anything. He recognizes that her withdrawal is less about him and more about her need for control. So he chooses to remain still, calm, and focused. The moment he refuses to be baited, the dynamic shifts. Instead of proving her power, her silence starts working against her. She begins to wonder why he hasn't reacted, why he hasn't chased, why her absence isn't pulling him in the way she expected. What she thought would expose his weakness ends up exposing her own. Because true silence is not a weapon unless the other person allows it to be. At the beginning, when she pulls away and leans into silence, she often feels a surge of confidence. She tells herself she is in control, that you will break long before she does. She expects the pattern she has seen so many times before, a man who cannot handle distance, a man who floods her phone with messages, or who reaches out under the weight of loneliness. In her mind, your silence is temporary, a pause before you cave in and give her the validation she secretly craves. For a while, this thought keeps her comfortable. She interprets her silence as strength and convinces herself that she holds all the cards. But as the days pass and her expectations are not met, the atmosphere begins to shift. What once felt like power starts turning into unease. The text she thought she would receive never arrives. The late-night call she imagined doesn't happen. Slowly, the silence that was supposed to be her advantage begins to eat at her. Doubt creeps in, quiet at first but persistent. She starts to wonder what you are doing, who you are with, and why you haven't noticed her absence. The longer the silence stretches, the heavier it becomes. She begins checking your social media, scrolling through your posts, looking for any sign that you might be missing her or reaching out indirectly. What she doesn't realize is that her curiosity is the first crack in her frame of control. Silence, which she thought would break you, begins to unravel her instead. Every unanswered day forces her to confront the possibility that maybe you don't need her at all. And that thought lingers longer than any message ever could. For most women, silence begins as a bluff, much like holding a poker hand with shaky confidence. In the early stages, pride allows her to maintain the front. She tells herself she doesn't care, that she can outlast you, that you'll eventually fold. Pride is her armor, and for a short while, it sustains her. But pride has a short lifespan when it isn't supported by true emotional detachment. Eventually, doubt begins to seep in. She starts to ask herself questions she doesn't have answers for. Why haven't you reached out? Why haven't you cracked? Why aren't you doing what every other man before you has done? That doubt grows quietly at first, but it spreads until it begins to overshadow the pride she started with. Alongside doubt, curiosity becomes her constant companion. She scrolls through your online activity, checks to see if you've been online, looks for signs of you in mutual spaces. The more she searches, the more restless she becomes, because your silence leaves room for her imagination to wander. And the imagination is cruel. She begins picturing scenarios where you've moved on, where you're enjoying yourself, where another woman has taken the place she thought was secure. These thoughts create pressure, and that pressure often turns her silence into suffering. This is the stage where most men sabotage themselves. Overcome by their own doubts, they rush in, breaking the silence first to seek clarity or reassurance. That single move destroys the shift that was happening. By reaching out, they confirm her initial belief that she had control all along. They return the power to her hands, undoing the progress their discipline had created. The man who endures, however, allows the silence to work in his favor until it reshapes the entire dynamic. The man who stays steady during no contact transforms the entire situation, because his silence is not passive, it is active strength. He is not sitting around waiting for her to return, nor is he consumed by thoughts of what she might be doing. Instead, he takes the time that others would waste on doubt and turns it into fuel. He trains harder, builds his career, stacks his money, and sharpens his purpose. While she expects him to collapse under the pressure of her withdrawal, he uses that same space to expand his life. This is why his silence carries weight. It is not born of avoidance but of growth. Every day that passes, he becomes a little stronger, a little more disciplined, a little more untouchable. Meanwhile, she begins to feel the weight of her own strategy. At first, she may convince herself she's in control, but eventually her silence begins to work against her. The longer he doesn't chase, the more her imagination takes over. She begins to wonder what he's doing, why he isn't responding the way most men do, and whether she still has the same hold on him. Doubt turns into restlessness, and restlessness leads her to break the silence in small ways, liking a post, sending a casual hey, or dropping a breadcrumb to test if he will take the bait. But when he remains calm and unbothered, the frame shifts entirely. He no longer appears as the man orbiting her, he has become the man standing firmly in his own world. That is when true power shows itself, not in words, not in begging, but in the quiet strength of a man who proves that her validation was never the center of his life. Over time, silence has a way of peeling back the layers and revealing truths that words often cover up. When two people stop speaking, it doesn't just create distance, it creates exposure. Without constant communication to distract or soothe, both sides are forced to face the reality of what they actually feel. If she can sit indefinitely in silence without thinking about you, without wondering, without any urge to reconnect, then her emotional investment was never as deep as you may have believed. That realization may sting at first, but in truth, it is a gift. It provides clarity that no argument, no conversation, no promise could have given. You finally see where her heart truly stands, and you are spared the illusion of something that wasn't there. On the other hand, if the silence gnaws at her, if she finds herself restless and uneasy, then it becomes obvious that she cared far more than she admitted. Pride may have kept her from saying it, but emotions always leak through the cracks. The quiet begins to haunt her, forcing her to wrestle with the possibility that she is losing someone valuable. This is when she starts replaying memories, questioning decisions, and second-guessing whether she miscalculated your worth. For you, the silence is a test of discipline. It asks whether you will stay centered, whether you can resist the temptation to reach out for quick relief. The man who holds steady learns more than just the truth about her, he learns the truth about himself. He sees his own strength, his own patience, his own ability to value peace over chaos. Either way, silence brings answers. It either frees you from falsehood or confirms your significance. In both cases, you win. As the silence stretches, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The nature of attraction itself starts to shift. In the beginning, her interest may have been rooted in drama, in the chase, in the constant attention she received. That kind of attraction is shallow and fleeting, built on ego rather than substance. But when you refuse to play her game, when you stop feeding her with validation and prove through your actions that you can exist fully without her, the energy changes. You are no longer positioned as a man circling around her, waiting for scraps of attention. You become a man grounded in his own world, busy, focused, unshaken. That difference is magnetic, because it separates you from the endless line of men who crumbled the moment she pulled away. She begins to view you with a kind of curiosity laced with respect. Respect is not something you can demand, it is earned through action, through restraint, through the ability to remain composed when others would fall apart. And respect always alters attraction. A woman can be drawn to a man she doesn't respect, but that attraction rarely lasts. Respect, however, plants roots. It builds a foundation that lingers in her memory long after the initial emotions fade. Even years later, she may not remember every conversation or every detail of the relationship, but she will remember how you handled the silence. She will remember that you did not beg, that you did not chase, that you stood firm in your own strength. That memory leaves a permanent impression. By holding your ground, you reframe the entire dynamic from being a man who wanted her validation to being a man she must validate in her own mind. In the end, the battle of silence reveals itself to be something much deeper than a contest between two people. It isn't truly about her, and it isn't truly about you trying to win over her pride. The real war takes place inside yourself. The urge to break no contact, to reach out, to explain, to beg for understanding, the temptation doesn't come from her silence, it comes from within you. It comes from the restless part of your mind that craves validation, that wants certainty, that struggles to sit with discomfort. Mastering no contact means mastering that inner voice, proving to yourself that you can endure without breaking, that you can choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, discipline over impulse. She is only the catalyst for the test, she is not the opponent. If she never reaches out again, you have still won, because you've grown into someone stronger, someone who no longer needs another person to confirm his worth. If she does come back, it's not because you begged her to, but because she felt the pull of your unshakable presence. In either case, the outcome is in your favor. The silence has either freed you from someone who didn't truly value you, or it has proven your strength and drawn her back on new terms. What most men fail to realize is that no contact is not punishment, it is liberation. It is the space where truth is revealed and where self-respect is forged. The silence strips away illusions and shows you who you are when nothing external is feeding your ego. When you learn to find power in that quiet, you discover the greatest truth of all: your peace is stronger than her chaos, and your strength is not dependent on her response.